Welcome to Food for Thought. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. I am your host. You can find me at joyfulvegan.com. Welcome also back to Are You Eating Enough Protein? Part 2. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. If you haven't listened to part 1, I encourage you to go back and start there. We covered some foundational topics, including how U.S. dietary guidelines shaped our view of protein and why many people still think protein means meat. Animal meat. We talked about the shift from meat as a food group to protein as a nutrient category. We talked about how protein functions in the body, what amino acids are, and why amino acids in plants are identical to amino acids in animals, and why the RDA for protein is a minimum, not necessarily optimal, especially as we age or increase activity. And finally, we talked about what top plant-based nutrition experts recommend for daily protein intake and how that compares to the RDA, the recommended daily allowance. So that's part 1. If you missed it, I highly encourage you to go back and listen before diving into today's episode. And before we do dive in, please, just a reminder, this episode is for informational purposes only. It's not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health, medical condition, or before making changes to your diet, exercise, or medication. I ended the last episode talking about how I've made some really serious changes in terms of really kind of what I'm eating, when I'm eating it, how much protein I'm eating. I've grown in my thoughts about protein. Why? Because I've grown literally. I am 26 years older than when I first became vegan. I'm 26 years older than when I first started this work. I'm 18 years older than when I recorded that very first podcast episode about protein in 2006. I'm 5 years older since I have gone through menopause. I guess it's 4 years since I've gone through menopause, but years before that, since I started perimenopause, and I am 55 years older than I was when I was born. I have always known and always said that at different stages of life, we need to make tweaks, especially when it comes to certain vitamins, minerals, macronutrients. Teenagers, pregnant or lactating individuals, endurance athletes, those over 50, those over 70, we all have changing needs. I have taught that for years, but at some point it hit me that I'm now in one of those stages. I'm in a couple of those stages. I am 55. I am post-menopausal, and I am highly active. And with that in mind, it meant that I needed to make some tweaks, some adjustments of my own. I am age 55. I saw this meme. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. I think I saw it on Substack. And I love the reframe, even though I am saying I am 55 and I'm embracing it kind of for the first time. But I saw this meme that said something along the lines of, instead of saying age 55, saying level 55 or 50 or 25 or 35 or 80, wherever you are. And I love that so much because instead of, oh my God, I'm 55 and you're 40, lucky you. I'm 55, I'm so old, you're so 40 or whatever. Instead of that, it is, I'm level 55, you're only level 40. Not that it's a comparison, but you get the idea, especially considering when I think about, I'll compare it to myself. When I think about when I was 40, I was at level 40. I am now at level 55, and I know so much more, and I am so much better than I was, so much smarter, so much stronger, to be honest, than I was at level 40. Certainly stronger than I was at level 50. So I love that reframe. And so now being level 55, I literally had to level up. And that's what I'm doing. Now, notice that I did not say I made adjustments and tweaks because I'm vegan. Nope. That has nothing to do with any of the changes I have made that I'm going to share with you. I didn't make any tweaks and changes because I'm vegan. So listen to part 1. Protein has always been part of my diet, and getting plenty of health healthy plant-based protein has always been part of my diet. That hasn't changed. What has shifted isn't my vegan perspective, but my perspective from a food, nutrition, age, fitness level, sex, stage of life standpoint. Maybe not changed as much as deepened, right? And become more relevant for me. Partly because new research supports these shifts, but mostly because I've changed. I've leveled up. And I plan to keep leveling up for a long time to come. So what does that look like? What changes have I made? What was such a game changer when it came to protein consumption? So I have always been an active person, a very highly active person. Just ask my mom. My mother would have told you, believe me, that I was a very active person. Ever since I was little, I was always on the move. I have always had kind of extraordinary levels of energy. Ask my husband. You can ask my husband. I wasn't, however, an athlete. I was never committed to one sport. My sister was that. She was a star basketball player. She got a scholarship to college for basketball. She was the athlete. I was interested in nutrition, especially as I was getting kind of older. I'm talking like outside of teenage years now. I was interested in nutrition. I was interested in fitness. I certainly did my abs of steel when I was in my 20s, and I was interested in that. I used to work in a health food store. So I've always been since my young adult years, I have been interested in feeling fit and feeling strong. And like many women raised in a culture like the United States, I definitely put a value on being thin. I, of course, cared about my weight, not in an obsessive way. I've never had any kind of eating disorder, but of course, I've been mindful of my eating and my weight since I've been a woman and since I've been a girl, a woman, and aware of the pressures on us in the culture we live in. And not gonna lie, there have been times when I felt I was doing all the things and I still didn't feel like I was reaching my goals, my weight goals, my fitness goals, to be toner, to be thinner. And I've never been one of those people who could just eat whatever and not gain weight or what. I've not been one of those people. There have been times, especially times where I've called my winter weight, especially when we've gone on our trips to Alsace, to Rwanda. And, on our trips, there's definitely an abundance of food and it's winter time. And I do think there's also a metabolism shift that happens in the wintertime. And I would gain 5 pounds, 10 pounds, and it would always frustrate me. And I would kind of do the things and do the calories in, calories out, checking the scale, kind of restricting some calories, but not in an obsessive way, just in a way that I was mindful of wanting to reach my goals. And sometimes I'd reach those goals. Sometimes I'd go up, I'd fluctuate. And that's just been my journey. I'm human. And so I can say that there have definitely been times where it was really frustrating, especially in the last few years. I have I hate to use the phrase I've always been, but I mean, I have been for very many years consistent in fitness, consistent in walking, not just walking and hiking, kind of just being active, but also doing dedicated cardio. I have a spin bike. I would do classes. I would do weights. And it's really funny because I remember in the last few years sharing with friends how frustrating it was. Like, why, as if I didn't recognize the question, why aren't I, why isn't it as easy as when I was in my 20s? I mean, that's such an obvious answer, but kind of not. I mean, I don't think we talk about it enough because even when I was asking that question 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I wasn't identifying that I was in a completely different time in my life cycle and my hormone cycle. And we are going to be doing an entire series on menopause. So that's not what this episode is about, but it's all related because a couple years ago, I decided, things are changing. This is just what it looks like. Gravity's doing its thing. I'm 55. I'm now in post-menopause. And I want to see how possible it is for me to change my, basically body composition. So what does it look like for me to get stronger, get toner, get leaner, and do that in my postmenopausal years? So that was kind of on my mind. And the research that I kept coming across, and I think you've seen it yourself, is that resistance training is not just beneficial as we're aging, and we're all aging, by the way, it's essential. And we should all be lifting heavy things in our 30s, in our 40s, in our 50s, in our 60s, and beyond. And I have, for many years, lifted heavy things at home. I'm not a gym person. I used to belong to the Y. That's where I used to do my weights. This is now back in my 20s and early 30s, but I really prefer doing workouts at home. I just do. And for years, my weights were like 7 pounds, 10 pounds. That's what I had at 10-pound dumbbells. I had resistance bands, and I love resistance bands because I would travel with resistance bands. So for the last few years, I've been kind of like upping my resistance game ish. And I say ish because compared to what I'm doing now, it's ish. But about a year ago is when I knew I really wanted to level up and kind of see where I can change my body composition. And my friend Bridie Reed from World Vegan Travel, and we talk about fitness and health and wellness a lot. Um, on her recommendation, I bought adjustable dumbbells. And I talk about this in a Substack post, and I have a link to my favorite Core Fitness. And I highly recommend them. And I now had heavier weights. And so I shifted my focus, adding more frequent and more intense strength training sessions to my routine. And I was seeing some results, but not a lot. And so I kind of was still aware that like it was good. I'm consistent. I am never inconsistent. I am nothing if not determined, consistent, self-motivated. It's never been a problem for me. My diet was always healthy, was continuing to be healthy. I eat better than anybody I know, whole foods, lots of plants, not a lot of highly processed foods. I don't drink soda. I mean, just like pretty, pretty good. And I know that results take time, so it wasn't like I was expecting this in a week, but I just felt like I was really working hard and nothing was happening. And so I wondered if something was missing. I hoped something was missing because I thought something was wrong with me, that I really wasn't seeing the changes that I thought I should see considering how much work I was putting in. And then already being on YouTube for my workouts, other fitness videos and fitness experts, of course, because of algorithms, started popping up in my feed. And there was this woman whose face kept showing up, and I just kept ignoring it. The thumbnail, I think, said something about protein. And I kept scrolling past it because I'm like, I don't need to hear anything about protein, especially from someone who I have no idea. I'm assuming she's not vegan. I don't know her. I don't know her face. And I presumed like what she was going to say was about animal protein. So I ignored her for quite some time until one day I finally clicked, and that click changed everything. It was the tipping point because all these things that I had already been researching and thinking about and knowing and teaching, it was all kind of coming together. And then I clicked this video, and it really was one of those, kind of watershed moments where it kind of all came together. And that someone was Dr. Stacy Sims. So you probably already know her. I didn't know her. She's an exercise physiologist, she's a nutrition scientist, and she specializes in women's health, especially how our needs change across the menstrual cycle, across perimenopause, post-menopause. Her work is all about getting women smarter, fueling better, and just getting stronger by aligning fitness and nutrition strategies with our unique physiology, especially at different times in our lives, in our different life stages. And so the premise of Stacy Sims' work is very simple, but it's groundbreaking. Women are not small men. She has a TED Talk called Women Are Not Small Men. And in short, the research and the protein guidelines we have followed for decades were largely based on studies of older sedentary men. And guess what? They don't always apply to women, especially as we age. And so she dives into how hormones and muscle development and recovery and metabolism shift over time and what you can do to support them through training and through nutrition, including protein. And so her recommendations are based on sports nutrition literature and her own research into protein metabolism and muscle maintenance. A lot of her work is in aging female athletes. She's worked with athletes for many years, but it pertains to all of us. Now, remember, the protein recommendations we looked at were from the RDA and from experts, the ones I named, like Dr. Michael Greger and Simon Hill and Brenda Davis. The highest recommendations were from Simon Hill, who, by the way, interviewed Stacy on his podcast, The Proof. So go listen to that. And also from Maxime from Fit Vegan. And both of them recommended about 0.8 8 grams of protein on the high end per pound of body weight, and especially as you're more active. And Stacy's on the higher end of that, along with Simon Hill, to go into that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, especially for active women. And I want to stop there and touch on that before we move on, because I know you might be thinking, well, I'm not really an active woman, and that sounds really high for me. So, what does that mean for me? So, number one, you can gauge that your activity by the frequency, by the duration, by the intensity of your workouts or lack thereof. And you might find that right now you would not put yourself in that category. But especially if you are perimenopause or postmenopause, I think Stacy and Maxime and Brenda Davis and many others would agree that you will want to put yourself in that category. You want to become an active woman. You want to be an active woman. Now, there's just a huge range of what that means for you. That doesn't mean you have to become a competitive athlete. That does not mean you have to start training for a marathon. That does not mean you have to become a bodybuilder. But there is a huge range. And, as I've said before, better is better. Can you do better than where you are now? Can you increase the duration? Can you increase the intensity? Can you increase the frequency of your workouts, especially resistance training? I know you've been hearing this more and more. We all have. The emphasis, the need to prioritize resistance training over simply adding cardio. So, even if you don't currently see yourself in that active category, it's essential, I think, to aspire to get there. Active has a range. So, just be gentle with yourself, but be honest with yourself as well. The other thing I want to say also, you'll hear people like Simon Hill say this, you'll hear Maxime say this. A lot of fitness, physiology experts who are talking about increased protein intake, and again, I'm really focusing on the plant-based experts. You're going to hear people in the meat-based space talk about this as well. So it's really not that different, except I'm talking about the benefits of doing it through plant protein because of all the other benefits you get. You get the fiber, you get the antioxidants, you get the phytochemicals, you get all the good stuff and none of the bad, none of the harmful, none of the problematic, none of the things that, make it difficult for us to sleep at night when we think about what happens to the animals. But what you'll hear them say is when you're calculating your ideal or optimal amount of protein for the day, you want to calculate that based on your ideal weight, reasonable ideal body weight. So that is something we can talk about another time, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there as well. So that is one of the things that changed for me drastically. And I do feel like I have a bit of this magical formula because making these changes and making these tweaks, I can really see a difference. So that was the biggest change, was the weights, but also my protein. I probably doubled it, but I say that with a qualification. I don't know how much protein I was eating before I started tracking it with the intention of increasing it. But in doing so, in increasing it and tracking it, I know I was probably getting about half of what I'm getting now because I'm doing it with so much intention. I was not doing it with so much intention before. Anecdotally, I would look back at my day and go, oh yeah, I had quinoa, I had tofu, I had, oats, I had soy milk, I had beans, I had whatever. And I know I was doing fine. I shared all my blood work with you, right? I mean, not that long ago. And, by all the measurements, my blood work was great. The protein in a blood, the protein in a blood test is good enough. Really, if you want to know how much protein you're actually getting for optimal intake, you got to track it. But by all the numbers, all of my numbers were fantastic. So I know it was fine. So even though those numbers checked out and even though I felt fine in terms of, you know, energy, but didn't feel fine in terms of the goals that I have. Um, and because of the stage of life that I was in, I do think now looking back that I was getting less than what was optimal for my activity level, my age, and my lifestyle. But that wasn't like, it's not like I've been off for, decades, but many of you might be because we haven't really talked about this very much. And so that's why I started increasing my protein. I want to add this as well because that episode I did on hair loss and hair thinning, remember I shared that it was really frustrating because it was a mystery. that I didn't know why I was experiencing hair thinning. And I know I did. I was experiencing it. There is no doubt. I go to my gynecologist and she was like, I don't know. That's just weird, which is so bizarre to me that my gynecologist, when I went to her and I looked back at the numbers again, I looked back at the history again when I was doing the series that I'm working on both protein and fitness and menopause. I mean, I was 50. I was 49 and 50 when I went to her and said, I don't know what's going on. Can we do these tests? Can we do hormone tests? Can we do thyroid? And she's like, that's just so weird. Like, I'm just really surprised it would be related to menopause. Come on. Anyways, there's a lot more to say about that. We'll say more in those episodes. But I did conclude at the end of that episode, and I do encourage you to go listen to it. I did conclude that I think it was because of perimenopause. Many women experience some degree of hair thinning during that time because of fluctuating and declining estrogen and progesterone, especially estrogen, which play a role in hair growth and in follicle health. Now, it is multifactorial. As I said, it could be influenced by genetics, by thyroid function, by stress, by nutrient status, and fluctuating and lower estrogen and no estrogen can definitely shorten the hair growth phase. And those hormonal shifts can make hair finer and more brittle and slow growth. And so even if your blood work looks normal, that doesn't mean your body is in its optimal state for hair growth, especially during this hormonal jolt of perimenopause. And I think that's what it was. That, as I shared, nothing stood out as a smoking gun, right? I was a little maybe on the lower side of vitamin D. I was maybe on the lower side of B12. I was maybe on the lower, but I wasn't deficient. And like true hair loss, and people talk about stress, you have to go through real trauma to experience like your hair literally falling out. So there was no smoking gun. And my protein levels, as I said, according to the numbers on my blood test, were fine. But looking back, I think I was missing a lever, a pretty important lever. During those hormonal shifts, your body like needs all the supportive nutrition and supportive exercise and supportive muscle building it can get. So I was doing really well in those areas, except I probably wasn't eating enough protein, as much protein as would have been optimal for my age, activity level, and stage of life. And I keep saying that because I have to qualify that. Now my hair has recovered. It started coming back 6 months, 8 months after the initial kind of, at least after the initial identifying that it was thinning, or I was kind of losing some, and it's been great for years now. I hope you agree. It has different issues because it's now changing texturally, because it's got more gray, but the volume came back, and it did. And that wasn't because I started eating extra protein at the time. I've only started intentionally adding extra protein kind of a few months ago. But the point I'm making is that I do think the protein amount I was eating was related, because it's like a perfect storm. Like during that really important, significant hormonal shift that we're going through during perimenopause, we want to make sure that we're shoring up all the other things, especially nutrients like protein. Why protein? Because estrogen is not just about reproduction. We tend to think of estrogen just being about, kind of having our periods, making babies, that's it. It plays a huge role in building and maintaining muscle, in repairing tissue, especially after workouts or damage, stress, protecting bone density. Of course, we hear about this a lot, regulating metabolism, managing inflammation, supporting cardiovascular health, and of course, influencing mood. We know that, and energy and sleep. When estrogen declines, as it does in peri and post, everything shifts. Everything shifts. All of those things. The muscle protein synthesis slows. The strength and bone density drop. The metabolism slows. Recovery takes longer. Inflammation can increase. Our bodies just don't respond to activity and training the way they once did. So what? We need a new signal. It's not about just like crawling under the covers and being like, all right, that's it. Now, one signal that some people turn to is hormone replacement therapy, and we are going to talk more about that. But let's put that off the table for a moment and just talk about what signal is missing, estrogen, and once it's missing, what we need is a new signal now that we're losing the estrogen, which was once that signal. Protein delivers that signal to trigger the muscle protein synthesis, to trigger bone remodeling, to trigger regulating all of those metabolic processes that estrogen once influenced. Without that signal, the body is more likely to break down muscle instead of building it, and that's where protein comes in. So for now, what I just want you to know is that is, and I keep saying peri and post, I may have said this in the hair thinning episode. I remember for years, I was like, wait, I don't understand. And we talk about perimenopause and then we talk about menopause, but like, me, I love my semantics. So I would be like, what does it mean to be in menopause? Because of course the definition of menopause means you haven't had your period for 12 months or more. That's it. And so I would say to my gynecologist, I'd be like, I don't understand why we say then, am I in menopause then? Then what's post-menopause? So anyway, now I really, really understand it much better. And I think I can convey it better, which is perimenopause is the time where your estrogen is starting to fluctuate more. You haven't lost it completely, but it's fluctuating. And that can start happening when you're 35, can start happening by the time you're 40, certainly by the time you're 45, certainly by the time you're 50. Average age of women going through menopause, and I'll come back to that, is about age 53. And so menopause means that moment, that day, that moment. And I have it on my calendar. And I really encourage you to put it on your calendar if you are approaching that date, if you are in perimenopause, or if you can go back and look to see if you can put it on the calendar, because it's been really significant to be able to go back and look at that date. Menopause is that day that you have not had your period for 12 months or more. And then post-menopause is that time anytime after that. So that's basically what it is. And what I'm just trying to convey is that in perimenopause and in postmenopause, increasing your protein is about giving your body the stimulus that estrogen used to provide so that it can keep repairing and rebuilding and thriving. And if you're listening to this, guys, if there's any guy listening to this, this is something you need to know because you need to know this to understand what your sisters and mothers and wives and girlfriends and daughters are going through because it's significant. It is such a significant shift. And of course, men don't know this as well. You do not go through the same kind of shifts as we do. You have some loss of testosterone, but you don't go through it as dramatically. You don't lose as much testosterone as we lose estrogen. And so I know you might think this doesn't pertain to you, but obviously sarcopenia is something to be concerned about for all aging people, which is all of us. We're all aging people. We're all leveling up. So if you want to get a sense of how much protein you're eating now, just start tracking now without making any changes. I think it'll be really helpful to just get a baseline. So for me personally, I'm aiming for about 0.75 to a gram of protein per pound of body weight each day. I am not stressing if I don't hit that amount. Yes, I am tracking. And I do think it's helpful to track in the beginning. I'm using a really fabulous tracker called Macro Factor. I had to look to see what it was. It's called Macro Factor, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm tracking, but over time, you just get to know how much protein 100 grams of tofu has, how much protein 200 grams of protein has, how much protein 100 grams of beans has, quinoa, whatever. See, look, I can do the metric system. I can do metric. So you just get to know it over time, but I am tracking it for now and I'm finding it really helpful. To answer a question you might have right now about excess protein on your kidneys or liver, the answer is no. It is not something to worry about for plant eaters. It is something to worry about for meat eaters because excess protein and having just a lot of overload of animal protein really overloads certain organs and increases the risk of chronic diseases. You can find out more about that elsewhere, but we just don't see that same phenomenon in plant eaters. Around 1 gram of protein per body weight is considered safe, a safe upper limit. And that is reported by our very own Brenda Davis and Visanto Molina in their book, Plant Powered Protein. And so let me just quote what she says, because I know there's going to be some time that you're might have to adjust to what I'm saying in all of these episodes because that might sound high to you, 100 grams a day. I know there was a time in my journey that 100 grams sounded high to me. It doesn't sound high to me anymore. it's been it's been a deep dive, and I really trust what the research shows, and I really trust what I'm experiencing. And so this is what Brenda Davis explains in her book. She says, for a lot of years, people in the vegan community believed that protein intake was associated with increased osteoporosis risk because protein can actually increase the loss of calcium in our urine. But we have known for many years now that protein is actually protective. While protein does increase urinary calcium excretion, it also enhances calcium absorption that promotes bone formation. So it actually has a net positive impact on bone health. And this has even been quantified. There was a study that showed for every 1 gram increase in protein, calcium absorption is increased by 1%. And we just need to recognize that most of the studies on vegans, the people that are at the higher end of protein intake, do better in terms of bone health. So we need to make sure we get enough protein. And that is an end quote from Brenda Davis. And I don't know who wrote it exactly, but Brenda Davis and Vasanta Molina from their book. And I really trust Brenda. I really, really trust what she says. So I think aspiring to whatever's comfortable for you, it might sound high, but do your best. Better is better. And as I've always said about aspirational goals, if you have a North Star, you will naturally aim higher. And even if you don't hit that goal every day, you will still land closer than if you hadn't actually set the goal at all. So do the calculations, see what works for you. And if it helps, for you, you might not want to think about the total per day because maybe you don't want to sit around calculating, which is fine. But what might be more helpful, and Brenda says this as well, is if you just think about having 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal. 15 grams for your snacks. That might be more helpful for you because then you're splitting up the protein. And actually, that is recommended to split up the protein throughout the day. Don't weight it in the morning or in the evening, but split it up throughout the day. But that might even help you kind of think about it so it feels more manageable for you to just aim for 25 to 30 grams at each meal rather than calculating the protein for the day. So sit with that for a minute, see how that feels. And of course, we are going to be talking about which foods have higher amounts of protein in the plant kingdom, which foods do I eat, which foods do I love. I'm going to be getting to all of this. I'm going to be getting to which ones are higher. How is it possible to eat that much protein? What if you also want to lose body fat? How do you eat that much protein? Aren't you eating more food? How are you having a calorie deficit? What about high protein, low calorie foods for people who are aiming for weight loss or for people who are over 65 who have lost their appetite, which definitely happens as you get even older. I say even older, I mean even older than me, even at a higher level than me. What are the high protein, how do I feel about bars? How do I feel about protein powders? How do I feel about protein trackers? What are my favorite protein trackers? Are there certain amino acids we need to be thinking about more? Is my entire life going to be consumed with tracking protein? What about when I travel? How do you eat? All these things. And then we're also going to be talking about resistance training and, why that matters. And I've already kind of said, how do I start? Do I have to have protein before a workout, after a workout? All the things. So we're going to be covering all of those things. And I know another question is, how do you feel having done this? Do I feel different? And I can tell you that I am not one of these people that's very good at, how should I say this? I was feeling good before. I'm very grateful and very lucky that I did not have depression or irritability or low energy or lack of motivation or, things like that. I was feeling good before that. And like I said, I was already kind of doing a lot of things. I was pulling a lot of levers. I don't tend to say this because it's hard for me. When you're feeling really good, it's hard to say, I'm now feeling better. When you're feeling really low, it's easier to gauge your improvement. That's what I'm trying to say. And I was already feeling pretty good. So trying to gauge that I'm or trying to express, which I'm clearly struggling to do, that I'm feeling amazing right now is hard because I already felt pretty good before, but I am kind of feeling incredible. My energy level, which is terrifying my husband, is higher than before. He has now declared that I'm going to need a second husband just to keep up with me because I cannot believe I have more energy than I had before because I have a lot of energy. My focus, I can say that I was definitely feeling unfocused. I was having trouble kind of staying focused on one task. I can say that. I don't I'm not experiencing that as much anymore. I'm feeling really focused. I'm feeling really energetic. I am definitely seeing definition in muscles that I wasn't seeing in all those years I was lifting weights and eating the minimum amount of protein. And I wouldn't say all this if it wasn't true. So I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I am just telling you that where I'm at now is what I want to share with you because it is so important. And yeah, menopause. I'm so grateful to be going through this time because I'm alive. And this is such a significant part of our life journey. I didn't go through pregnancy. I never had children. So those of you who experience those ups and downs, I'm sure you can identify with the significance of that. And certainly maybe that makes it easier for you. I don't know, probably not, because it's a really hard time. And so here we are at this really significant time and embracing it is enabling me to embrace just aging, leveling up. Does that make sense? And that's what I want to convey to you. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. So, we're going to be talking about when you want to start thinking about perimenopause, what actually happens during perimenopause. We're going to talk about the symptoms. We're going to talk about fatigue and irritability and hot flashes and night sweats and lack of focus and all of those common symptoms. We're going to talk about how to manage those symptoms. We're going to talk about how protein plays a role. We're going to talk about how different kinds of cardio play a role. We're going to talk about hormone replacement therapy. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of that. We're going to talk about soy. We're going to talk about how much we should be eating, if we should be eating any at all, if we should be eating more. We're going to talk about how to manage all of this together. And so if you are interested in joining me on this journey, wherever you are, please consider going over to Substack and just joining us, joyfulvegan.com, our private chats. It's a safe community. It's a compassionate community. I think you probably know that by now. There's no judgment. There's just curiosity and openness and kindness. And so we are having private chats over there. All of your questions, they are not public. Some of the things are public if you want them to be, but there's also exclusive content. I am going to be creating so much content around this. I'm going to be creating summaries of the episodes I've already done. I'm going to be creating charts for you, recipe packets. I am even thinking that this could be my next cookbook. All the things. I'm just kind of full of excitement about what I'm learning, what I'm experiencing, how I'm feeling, and how this could help you because that's what I've always wanted to do. How the information we need to share with each other so that we can all thrive doing the best we can to not hurt anybody, including ourselves, including animals, and to take away the fear that people have specifically around aging and specifically around not eating animal products, especially when we're aging, because there's just so much misinformation out there. So please join me over at Substack. And of course, you can join me on a Joyful Vegan trip. We just had our meeting about our 2027 trips. I can tell you we're not doing Tuscany. So if you're interested in Tuscany, we have a double room available at this recording. And we have so many trips lined up that we're really excited about. We have also a cancellation for Japan at this recording. So for 2026 Japan, I hope you can join me no matter what. I hope you are well. Please ask me your questions. Please join me in conversation for the animals. This is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thanks for watching. And thanks for listening.